Good afternoon and good morning. Thank you for joining us today for our 24-24 Retirement Confidence Survey webinar, focusing on the active military and veterans household. That is a special population we did this year for the survey. So I really want to thank you all for joining us. Today, the speakers will be me, Craig Copeland. I'm the Director of Wealth Benefits Research here at eBree. Lisa Greenwald, the CEO of Greenwald Research, who leads the questionnaire development and research on RCS from Greenwald. And then we also have Brian Kloss, the VP of Enterprise Advice from USAA. Brian has 27 years of experience in the industry, with 19 at USAA. At USAA, Brian has led the organization across USAA's bank, property and casualty, company, and life insurance. Today, Brian and his team develop and execute content strategy and digital experiences for USAA. As many of you may know, USAA business focuses on serving military veterans and other eligible family members. So we welcome our speakers today, and I appreciate everyone being here. First of all, without these sponsors that we have, we would not be able to do this survey. And they also provide very important insight into what they're seeing in the industry and what questions are of importance when we go into the field for this every year. So I want to thank our sponsors for 2024 for the survey, as listed here. One household item I want to talk about is the ability to ask questions, because we will have a Q&A at the end. We do this by using the chat function at the bottom. You'll see the little icon at the bottom that's circled here. And then a dialog box will pop up. And at the very bottom, you could type in your question. And when we get to the Q&A session, we'll ask those questions given the amount of time that we have left. So with that, I want to proceed with what we're doing. And first of all, I will talk about the 2024 RCS. We know this is the longest running survey of a kind. It was fielded back in January, from the 2nd of January through the 31st. We surveyed both retirees and workers. We had 1,255 workers this year and 1,266 retirees. We had an oversample of military individuals, and we weight all the responses so they're nationally representative. So we weight by age, sex, military status, household income, and race and ethnicity. And we see our margin of errors here. In these particular slides, you'll see an asterisk on the slides to show where there is a statistically significant difference. So that will be on any slides where we show that. The report was released yesterday, so it is available on the eBree website if you would like to see it. The slides that we go through today will be made available, as well as a recording of this will be sent out to anyone who has registered. As we go along, we're going to be touching on different topics within the survey. So Lisa or I will be presenting results from the survey, and then Brian will give us some experience and insight from working with military families and households through USAA and other experiences that he has with the military. So now, what do we mean by military households? So within this survey, military households are, first of all, we have the active military, which is anyone who is actively serving the U.S. Armed Forces, individuals, or who are currently in the National Guard or Reserve but not serve in the U.S. Armed Forces. Veterans then consist of any who report having served in the Armed Forces but no longer are. If the respondent does not meet the criteria, but the spouse, so the household then is also then included as a military household. So we have consistent answers for what these questions are to anyone that affects those households. One thing to be clear about is that there is far more veterans. You see there's 767 veteran households represented compared to 62 active households represented, because this is what matches what we find from the census relative to active personnel versus veterans versus the overall population. Because again, we want to make sure that this is nationally representative of all military households, not active or veterans, but overall. We'll see certain breakouts for active military and certain breakouts for veterans in the report. In general, everything we report will be military households as a whole as we go through our presentations today for the RCS results. So that brings us to some overview of the military households that we found. One thing that we have in military households is that they are far more likely to be older. In particular, you can see that there's 30% of the respondents for the military households were 75 or older compared to only 8% of the non-military households. And correspondingly, the non-military households respondents were more likely to be younger in the 25 to 44 range. Although there was not any significantly difference, there was small significant differences in income. The non-military families were more likely to be in the lowest income category, while the military families were more likely to be in the middle income category, but there wasn't any difference for the highest income category, 75,000 or more. One other difference is that military households are more likely to have a male respondent. Again, that's not surprising given the military. One other difference was the race and ethnicity. There was a higher percentage of white individuals from the military households, whereas the non-military households are more likely to have a Hispanic respondent for the survey. So that gives you some demographic breakdowns and gives you a little bit of idea of the differences that you have. Most of the slides that you'll see today from our survey will be controlled by income. So we do characterize or control for that in most of our slides for the differences between the military and non-military households. One big thing that we also saw here was that there was a difference in their financial status. In particular, you could see that non-military families were more likely to say that they had a minor problem. They considered debt to be a minor problem, whereas military families were more likely to say that debt was not a problem. You could see that 55% of military families said they considered debt not to be a problem compared to 46% of non-military families. We also saw military families more likely to have the highest level of assets compared to non-military families. So from a financial situation, the military families seem to be in a better situation going into that. One other thing I want to talk about is that we did get people across all branches of the military. The predominance is the Army, where 49% of the respondents had either are serving or had served in the Army. All of these, except for about 2%, are DoD employees, because we did get about 2% were in the Coast Guard, but otherwise it's mainly focused on the main forces through the Department of Defense for the survey respondents. So that brings us to the first topic. And as you can see, the first topic is retirement confidence, which is not surprising since it's a retirement confidence survey. And I'm also going to be talking about retirement preparations in this section. So the first thing we want to look at is retirement confidence, and meaning how confident our individuals think that they will have enough money to live comfortably throughout their retirement years. We could see that military households with either the middle income or the higher income were more likely to say that they were confident in these retirement prospects. However, there was not a difference between the military and non-military households at the lower income level. And this is something that we'll see in many cases, that those with a higher income in the military seem to be in a better situation or more confident in their situation, whereas we don't really see that difference for the lower income military families. We could also, this goes along then with the confidence that they've done a good job preparing for prepared financially for retirement. And again, the military households in the middle and upper incomes were more confident than the non-military households, whereas we did not see the difference for the lower income households. And the next one, the one thing that is somewhat universal is the percentage of workers who agreed that preparing for retirement makes them stressed. We could see that there was no difference between the military and non-military households. And we do see that, particularly for the two lower income groups, 70% of the household respondents were saying that preparing for retirement does make them feel stressed. We do see this going down for those with the highest incomes, but we still see it's 50 to 60% of people do think it is causing them stress to prepare for retirement. So planning for retirement is a stressful event and something that takes a lot of preparation and a lot of things that need to be done in order to do that. So one of the first steps that you could do is to calculate how much you actually need to save for retirement. And you can see these numbers by income are pretty low for those that have the lowest income. Only about 25% of those with the lowest income have even done a calculation to figure out how much money they'll need to have saved by the time that they will retire to live comfortably. It does go up into the middle income group, but it's still only a little over 40%. We do see as we get to the higher income group, in particular, where the military households are more likely to have done it, where you see it's 75% of military households in the upper income group have calculated compared to 61%, excuse me, for the non-military households. But again, you get up to the higher levels at the higher income, but you don't see the preparation technique, preparation task of this basic task taken at the lowest incomes. But some of the other preparation tasks that individuals can take, we do see that come out fairly, have come out higher for those in the military households compared to those in the non-military households. But in many cases, they're still pretty low. Whether it's thinking about how much money they'll need to draw from their savings, they thought about how they'll occupy their time. They calculated how much money they'll need to cover healthcare expenses. There's still overall 50 to 60% or even more have not done this preparation task. And we go to some other preparation tasks, such as estimate how much income they'll need each month in retirement, plan how they would cover an emergency expense in retirement, or thought about how long their spouse would live in retirement so they would know how much to spend. So those are all more likely to happen in military households, but you still see in some cases it's 50% that haven't done it. So there is room for all households to take on more of these tasks so they'll be better prepared for retirement. And this also then really looks into the confidence, because one of the things we see is those that have done a retirement calculation need are more likely to be confident in their retirement aspects. So I want to hand it off to Brian now, who can go into more specifics of military experiences he's seen on confidence and preparation.
All right, terrific. Thanks, Craig. I appreciate it. What you're seeing here, what I'm seeing here, both of these questions relate to a trend that I see brewing in the data. And the first one here is those military members that have the lowest income, those with making less than 35,000, are less confident and more stressed than their civilian counterparts, and against the higher earners, both in the military and in the civilian cohort. So the reason this is, and I think it's important to talk about who this cohort is, our military members that are making less than 35,000 a year are our young enlisted, generally speaking, on their first enlistment and within their first 3 years. So these are generally younger folks just getting started in the military and haven't had the opportunity to take full advantage of all the benefits that are available to them. So they are very much a relatively new and small cohort with a hopefully a long career in front of them. When it comes to the second question here, how do members feel about their ability to cover their basic expenses? Well, this is another trend that I'm seeing in the data, and that is a trend towards preparedness in general, both for retirement and for emergencies. In the full report, there's some additional information about emergencies where military members are out there and they're preparing. And I think this speaks to the ever-changing nature of the military role and the likelihood that they're going to experience some sort of life event. For example, a recent study from the Military Family Advisory Network shows military families move about once every 2.5 years. Having these consistent life events puts these military families in a planning type of mode that carries through to both emergencies and to retirement. The other thing that military members have is, in addition to their basic pay, their healthcare is taken care of through TRICARE, as well as special allowances for subsistence and for housing, which helps them manage their budgets better and make sure that they're preparing for and focusing in on those longer term goals, such as retirement and for emergencies. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Lisa to continue the conversation.
Thanks, Brian. Certainly key to preparing for retirement is making sure that you have access to good information and advice. I'm going to share a few key findings. from the RCS, and then Brian, hear your thoughts about info and advice for military households. Here you can see it's an odd chart. You want these numbers to be low. This is the percent agreeing that they do not know where to go for good information. And we do see a statistically significant difference in that lowest income level, that the non-military at 4 and 10 are more likely to agree they don't know where to go versus the third of military respondents in that under 35K bucket. You can see, while not statistically significant, directionally the same pattern in the higher two income groups, and overall, taken together, our military household respondents are less likely to agree that they don't know where to go, right? So there's a feeling, perhaps, or a greater feeling that military household members know where to go for advice. So looking at the next slide, where do they go? Not a lot of these are significant, but there are some interesting differences, right? So for our non-military respondents, family and friends is the top answer. Sorry, we need to go back one more. Thank you. At 4 and 10. Whereas for our military respondents, the top answer is a professional financial advisor at 4 and 10. And there's some other interesting similarities here, right? So probably lower on the list than many of us would like to see it is the employer and representatives from the workplace retirement plan provider. But those are equally utilized as resources by both military household members and non-military. And then the other significant difference that we captured here is way down at the bottom, and it's a small share overall, but at 7%, our military household respondents are more likely to say they turn to a nonprofit or an organization that focuses on serving a specific group or community, presumably in this case, the military community. And on the next slide, let's look at those advisor stats. So not surprisingly, use of a professional financial advisor increases with income for both military and non-military respondents. But among our higher income 75K or more respondents, our military household respondents are far more likely to report that they're working with a financial advisor. So Brian, I'm going to turn it to you to share some thoughts about where military households are getting their advice and information.
Thanks, Lisa. So this is one of my favorite topics, especially this first bullet here. So how do military members gain financial education? Well, they're a captive audience to some extent. So in the military, there is a lot of training built into their programs alone. So when the military, when they join, initial entry, when they promote, when they deploy, and when they plan to transition out, all of those moments are moments where financial education is provided and, quite frankly, mandatory for the military. And they're covering topics like basic finance, consumer protections, planning for the future, compensation, benefits, entitlements, saving and investing, major purchases. All of these are topics that are covered. And not only is this training mandatory, but it's been my experience that the leaders in the military are passionate about improving the financial security of the folks that they're leading. So this is something that stands out quite a bit with the military that I connect with. The next question here: where do military members go for financial guidance? Well, I think what I'm about to share ties perfectly to that. 4 out of 10 go to a financial advisor compared to what the non-military counterparts are doing. And the reason is because the military, through Military OneSource, which is a DoD benefit for the military, have access to financial counselors, one-on-one financial counseling, whether that's by phone or video or in person. And they're talking about topics, basic finance topics, including negotiating late fees, college savings programs, retirement programs. All of those things are open conversation with these available counselors that are there. It also doesn't surprise me to see that nonprofits is a key resource for the military. There are a lot of nonprofits out there, many that are there to specifically support the military and their families, and many of them are very specific to the financial needs of those families. And there's quite a few out there. Beyond that, there is financial providers that cater to the specific needs of the military as well. So those are also resources that military is using to help ensure their financial security. So it all comes together with the education and support they're getting from the military, but also those outside of the military to support them. And I'm going to hand it back to Craig to take us to the next topic.
Yes, thank you, Brian. The next topic we will talk about workplace plans, retirement plans specifically. I want to talk about the things I would talk about from the survey are knowledge about how the tax treatment is or other features of retirement plans through the workplace, improvements to the plan, and then one issue that we've seen out of the plans for the military compared to non-military households. So the first thing is we asked a series of questions about how they feel they understand the following features and regulations related to workplace retirement plans. And we can see that in all 5 of these, the military households were more likely to say that they understood these features, whether it's the difference between Roth and traditional contributions, tax treatment of withdrawals during retirement, what the catch-up contributions are, required minimum distribution rules, and then tax treatment of retirements of withdrawals before retirement. So both of that retirement, the military households seem to have a better feel, a better understanding. In many cases, you're up to over 80% of the military households understand that, but some of these others, they're not quite as familiar. But it's still pretty high numbers. The non-military households seem to be in a situation where you're almost to a half that don't understand these rules. But again, as for the military households, they seem to be pretty well versed in these particular regulations or features around workplace retirement plans. One other interesting is we asked the question of what the most valuable improvements individuals think for their retirement savings plans. And these are the way it came out. These are the top 6 rank. The one thing that was interesting is that while the rankings are different, there wasn't really any statistical significance in what people cited between military and non-military households when you look at the raw numbers that did it. But the rankings were somewhat different, as you can see that the most military families seem to be most concerned with having investment options available for after they retire, whereas non-military families seem to be more focused on their ability to save for emergencies. Ability to save for emergency is important among military families. It just didn't come out at higher relative to some of the other possible valuable improvements to the workplace savings plans. So we do see that there is many commonalities, but there is slightly different in the rankings. And that's the big one, is that there really seems like their military households are really concerned about investment options for after they retire. The one that is second for both military and non-military is the investment options that provide guaranteed lifetime income after you retire. In the general results, we saw that was a pretty high interest in that for overall. And you can see that even between military and non-military, it comes out to be one of the highest ones. There seem to be a great deal of interest in these guaranteed lifetime income options from workplace savings plans. However, still, as many of you know, the take-up isn't there, but there does seem to be that interest, and it seems to be among the younger workers, regardless of military, non-military status, that are most interested in those type of options within their plan. So that's an important thing to think about, really how these can be improved. And that is one of them that both military and non-military households are thinking about. The one real kind of issue that kind of stood out that wasn't as positive for military households is that they were far more likely to have taken a loan or withdrawal from their workplace savings plan. You can see that was 22% of military households had taken one overall, whether 12% had taken it more than 12 months ago. whereas you can see that it was only 16% overall for non-military. So that's the one part that you can see that, and this may be involved with changing jobs, getting reset, or they're moving a lot, and that this is a source that they may be using for those type of issues. So I'm going to hand it off to Brian now to talk more about some of the specifics of the workplace savings plans that military members can take advantage of.
Hi, Craig. Thank you. We have two bullets here, two things to talk about. And the first one is, what retirement plan does the military have available to them? So the military has something called the blended retirement system. There's two pieces to it. The first one is called the TSP. And the TSP is much like a non-military 401k plan. And with that plan, service members are auto-enrolled every single year up to 5% into what they call a lifestyle fund, which is a target fund closest to their retirement age. That automatic enrollment, the service members may opt out after the automatic enrollment, but that reoccurs every single year. So there is an effort every single year to keep service members contributing at that 5% or greater. There is also a match. So there is a 1% automatic match. Even if the military member is not contributing to the TSP, they are earning 1% match into that account. And then there is a match up to 5% as they increase their contributions up to 5%. So in all, you could have a 5% contribution and a 5% match in the TSP. There is also a defined benefit part to the BRS, and that is a pension that's available to those that retire from the military. The second question here is, even with access to the TSP, why might a military member be behind on their retirement savings? So I think one of the things that's important to understand with a thrift savings plan, in particular, the match on the thrift savings plan, it's on basic pay, on base pay, not on the additional allowances the military gets. And especially in the lower ranks, those early enlisted, those additional allowances could be 60%, 50 to 60% of their pay is those additional allowances, but the match that is being provided by the military is only on that basic pay. So that's an important consideration, especially for those early, because that match may not be as much as they expected it. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Lisa for the next topic.
Thanks, Brian. You described some pretty strong retirement plan benefits available to military veterans households. But on this next slide, this one for me took a little bit of myth busting, and I know it's an important point for you too, Brian. On the next slide, we see the vast majority of our military household respondents and our veteran households report they separated before reaching retirement. So that's really important, because that's transition number one, right? They're transitioning from military to another career, which nearly all, 96% of our respondents said they worked for pay in another career after their military service. So, wonderful benefits available to them while they're in, right? But then they transition out before hitting retirement. Other things that we see in the RCS about that transition to retirement, a little bit on retirement ages here on the next slide. So this is our workers, right? These are our folks still working and expecting to retire at an average age of 64, right? That's the average. Oftentimes we show the median. We're showing our average here, 64. But you can see a pretty big difference in that darkest green bar. The percent who say they plan to retire at age 70 or older. And it's nearly a quarter of our military households respondents who say they plan to retire at 70 or older, compared to just 14% of our non-military And just like we see in our Gen Pop sample on the next slide, our retirees tell us a different story. Our retirees tell us that on average, they've retired at 60, if military, 61, if non-military, right? And there's a very big difference in this gray bucket from 62 to 64. So the reality is about 3 in 4 military respondents who have retired did so before age 65. You know, despite the nearly 1/4 of workers who plan to work to 70 and beyond, right? So this is a trend somewhat similar to what we talk about in Gen Pop, right? The risk that you will actually retire sooner than you think you will. So on the next slide, we have a couple questions among our RCS retirees. How are things going in retirement? And for both military and non, we see that about 3 in 10 say that their overall lifestyle in retirement is better than expected, somewhat or much better than expected. And about half are saying it's about the same as they expected. So the experiences once retired, got to start using air quotes a lot with that, is quite similar between those in our military households and non. And a little bit more on that on the next slide. Here in the middle, you can see whether military household or non-military household respondent, about 7 in 10 agree, at least somewhat, that they are having the retirement lifestyle they envisioned. And whether military or not, it's the same for each. Roughly 8 in 10 say they are able to spend money how they want within reason. And the one significant difference that we saw here is that our military household respondents were more likely to say that they spend less than they could because they'd like to leave a legacy or an inheritance. So that's at 39% versus our non-military retirees at 30%. So I'm going to wrap up with a few overview points from what Craig and I presented. Oh, I'm not ready for that yet. Brian's going to talk to us about retirement transitions. My apologies.
Hi, Elisa. Yeah, thank you for that. And we have two bullet points to think about here. So what are the retirement impact differences between military retirees and non-military retirees? Well, I think the first thing is, and it's back to an earlier slide where we show that most people don't retire from the military. There have been a number of studies on this. The military does not provide this information. A RAND study put this somewhere in the ballpark of 15%. I've seen 20 as well. That don't actually retire from the military. They separate from the military prior to retirement. But those that do retire also retire with a pension, as well as access to TRICARE, which is a real cost-efficient benefit for them, and several other benefits. So there are some real benefits to those that ultimately retire from the military versus those that separate, who don't retain really any of those benefits. The next question here is, how does the transition to civilian life differ between military retirees and those who separated before retirement? So what we've seen, and I'm thinking about a Blue Star Family Lifestyle Survey that comes out every year, and that survey calls out those that retire from the military have time to plan for it and don't find that transition nearly as difficult as those that ultimately just separate from the military. In some of the key areas of difficulty, according to that survey, are finding employment and making that transition from military employment to non-military deployment. Also, just financial management in general, because there is the loss of those allowances for housing and subsistence and the TRICARE healthcare benefit as well. And then there's the other thing with military is we mentioned that there is on average move every 2.5 years. They don't tend to have the roots in a location, the support systems that are out there. So the transition out of the military for those that are separating is difficult and a challenging time for military members. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Lisa to start closing this out.
Sorry, I jumped the gun earlier. Here, just some summary takeaway things. Really two big bullets, two big headlines here, right? What we see in RCS this year is that our military household respondents are more confident in their ability to live comfortably through retirement. And when we think about why that might be, we see that they also feel confident they're doing a good job preparing. And in fact, they are more likely to engage in several of the planning activities that we've asked about. We see they feel more likely to know where to go for good financial and retirement planning advice, with 4 in 10 saying they turn to an advisor, and at those higher income levels, more likely than non-military households to turn to an advisor. We do see, as Craig was sharing, that our military respondents claim to have a higher understanding of their workplace plans, many of the inner workings of their workplace plans and the treatment of withdrawals from those plans, though they also are more likely to report taking loans and withdrawals. And to enhance plans, our military respondents really seem to prioritize better explanations and options for income. And while it's not super high on the list, the ability to save for emergencies is on there for both military and non-military households. And yet we still see some evidence and have reason to believe that the transition to retirement still presents challenges for military households in the same way it does for non-military, right? Most separate from the military before retirement eligibility, and nearly all have a second career. We see that military respondents are more likely to say they plan to work until they're 70 or older, but in reality, the retirement age is about 60. And we know that the retirement lifestyle for both military and non is going about as expected, and that retirees are spending money as they wish within reason, though our military households have a stronger inheritance or legacy motive than our non. So Brian, could you tell us a little bit more about your overall takeaways from these data points?
Absolutely. Thanks, Lisa. So for the military, what we see in the military is higher confidence in preparing for and living in retirement. And I think this comes down to a couple different things. It is ultimately the guidance and education and that the military provides, the focus on financial security that they're hearing from their leaders, and the mandatory training that they see. It gets them started early and creates a lifelong foundation of focusing in on making sure those needs are met in retirement and for emergencies. The other thing is with the benefits, particularly with the TSP and the potential for a pension, creates the simplicity of savings. It's the automatic enrollment, and it's the re-enrollment every single year to help ensure that military members are saving, not to mention that 1% that is going into their TSP, whether or not they're contributing or not, creates that mindset around saving. And then finally, our military members having this potential for a pension, the health benefits that are included with military service, as well as the housing assistance and the sustenance assistance. All three of those are subsistence. All three of those things help create this environment of managing a budget and planning for things that are in the future. There is a last one here that I'm going to call out. I didn't put it on the list, but because I don't hear about it as much anymore. But for those military members that really don't take care of their finances, for some, there may be issues to their employment and their security clearance. We don't hear that as much from the military as we used to, but I want to throw that in there because whether it's an issue or not, if it's a perceived issue, it may be driving some of the behaviors of our military members. With that, I am passing it back to Craig for Q&A.
Right, and remember, we'll have some Q&A. I have some questions already. If you want to, you can put them into the chat, at the bottom, and we can you will be able to go through these questions since we have some time here. But first, I have a question for this about the survey results. Like Lisa, you just showed that the lifestyle seems to meet expectations in most cases. But we also have seen a great deal of price increases in the last couple of years, and we showed that seemed to be affecting what happened in the overall retirement confidence survey. So what do you think retirees are saying about this, and how these two things relate to each other?
So one thing I always like to say is I think we underestimate how flexible retirees in general can be with their lifestyle. There were virtually no differences in our military household respondent retirees and our non-military in how they experience their expenses, right? So about half overall of both audiences said that their overall expenses are higher than they expected. About 4 in 10 of both military and non said their health and their dental expenses were higher than expected, and just shy of 4 in 10 said their housing expenses were higher than expected. So the experience between military households and non in retirement seems to be really similar. And even though these retirees are experiencing higher expenses in many cases, they're still telling us that the lifestyle is what they envisioned, and they're living the lifestyle that they envisioned.
I have another question that comes in for Brian. For those that don't really understand the military system as well, is the old kind of standard was 20 years to get military service to qualify for retirement benefits, compared to less than 20 years. Then we adopted the blended retirement service. Can you kind of explain that, and and then see if what you're seeing, if more people seem to be prepared now that they don't have to go to the full 20 years to get benefits? I know it's only been in effect for 5 to 10 years, but it's still what you're seeing or what you're hearing about that.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. It's my opinion that the BRS is a real benefit for the military, and the reason is because such a small number of individuals ultimately retire from the military. This creates a mindset of saving and a real opportunity to save in the event that the pension isn't available. So this is in my opinion a win, splitting up that the defined benefit, the pension, and the TSP, really helping the 85%, 80 to 85% who don't ultimately retire.
And because before the blended system became, you had to go the full 20 years to get any benefits. If you didn't make 20 years, you received no pension benefits. That was the big factor before, correct?
100%. That's right. So any savings other than the pension had to happen outside of the military.
Lisa, one of the things we saw is that changes that do we see any changes that people got information? We saw friends and family being top. And is there anything else that workers can do to better prepare for their retirement other than looking at these sources of information?
Year over year, the top 3 sources of financial and retirement planning information for Americans is really consistent, right? We always see friends and family, your own online research, and a personal professional financial advisor sort of right up there at the top in varying orders, depending on the audience or the data cut or the subsegment of the group. And we see, the employer and the retirement plan provider almost very consistently middling on that list. I think in general, probably preaching to the choir, it would be better for Americans to get professional financial advice and guidance, as opposed to relying on an uncle or who happens to be really good at picking stocks, or doing their own online research where we don't know what site they're landing on or the credentials and validity of the information being provided. So I think the more we get professional sources in the hands of working Americans, the better.
Brian, there's a question that came in. What do you think, is there a particular key factor in the higher retirement confidence survey, higher confidence for military families? And then what other benefits do you think are playing a key role in retirement and financial planning?
It's great. Thanks, Craig. I think the higher retirement confidence is ultimately due to starting soon, having the training and the support and the inspiration to take action right out of the gates and start thinking about retirement right from the beginning. So I think that is I think that's the key driver. The only other thing I can say is for those that ultimately retire and those that are aspiring to retire, having a pension today is less. There's less and less of that in the world. So having that available is another driver of confidence. There is a lot of other benefits that we didn't talk about today in the military. Some of them come with deployments, such as tax-free pay while deployed in a combat zone, or there's a savings program while members are deployed in a combat zone that pays a much higher rate than what people are finding in banks. And there's also benefits the potential for reduced interest rates with the Servicemen's Civil Relief Act. So there are other benefits out there that, when the military takes advantage of these benefits, can give them a leg up against those non-military counterparts. There's other benefits associated with retirement. So there is a survivor benefit plan, the SBP, for that's a continuation for survivors of the pension, and that requires that there's a cost associated with that and a decision associated with that. But that's another benefit that's out there. There is a lump sum option on the pension that another decision and another potential benefit. And then there's life insurance benefits that we haven't talked about today, both for those that are active duty and as they transition to non-military. So all of those together create a real opportunity for a military member to set themselves up for success if they take advantage of it all.
We had one question in here to clarify the 20 year threshold for between the old system and the blended system. That threshold didn't change, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, thanks for the clarification on that. It is 20 years for the retirement, so that has not changed.
It's just the components of the system changed in the blended system, right?
That's right. That's right. So it's now split between the TSP, a 401k, and the blended system rather than pure pension. It's pension plus TSP rather than just pure pension.
Also potentially of how the military pension interacts with someone that would then go work for the federal government. How does that play out?
Yeah, there is pensions with the DoD and federal government, but I'm not able to get into the details on those complexities right now. There's a lot of ins and outs to that.
Okay. One thing we talked about is the lower income military households didn't seem to be as confident or as prepared as those at the upper income. Do you know what could help this group, or have you seen what have you seen help those that are lower income in preparing for retirement? Yeah,
it's a really important question, Craig. It's pretty clear that those making under 35,000, so those that are new to the military, are challenged, as are non-military, just getting started in their careers as well. But the military does make a lot of support available. I can't speak to them all now, but if there is trouble meeting the basic expenses of living, food and shelter and so on, there is the potential to get some support from the military. And really, I think the key, though, is taking advantage of those counselors and the support that the military makes available to help navigate those conversations, navigate those benefits, and make sure they're ultimately taken care of. The military wants its troops to be financially secure, and the engagement from the leadership it shows loud and clear in the engagement from leadership. So it's about asking and taking advantage of what's out there.
I have another question that comes in about whether people are using particular external advisors to ERG groups that focus on veterans. I know there are a couple companies that we've talked with that do this. So I know Morgan Stanley does this, and also I think Voya as well as an employer are a couple that provide this type of benefit to really address veterans that work with them to better work with them. And I assume USAA probably has some of these services available that they're working with plan-specific sponsors as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So USAA does have resource groups for veterans and partners with nonprofits to help members make the transition to non-military jobs. Just like there's a number of nonprofits focused on the financial security of military, there's a number out there helping that transition, both through mentorship, job finding, and quite frankly, a lot of other key areas of making that transition.
Okay, I want to give Brian a chance to kind of really focus on. He's given us so much information today. If there's like one or key things that people could take away that we really think that would help military prepare for retirement, that would be a really helpful takeaway.
Yeah, happy to do it, Craig. So the first thing here is recognizing that only 15 to 20% are going to retire from the military. So starting early to not plan on the pension being the primary source of income when they retire, but let that be a bonus. Focus in on individually saving and taking advantage of the benefits that are available to the military right from the beginning. So it's about taking advantage of TSP and any saving vehicles that are available to them, or savings that are available to them. And I think this just blends into the second piece of this, which is there are a lot of benefits. We went through some of them earlier. Taking time to work with the counselors the military makes available, listening to the trainings, working with your leaders to take advantage of all the benefits that are available to you. They are, as a military member, they are all intended to improve financial security, improve confidence in retirement, and make sure that whether they separate or they retire, their financial security is intact.
Thank you, Brian and Lisa. So I just want to talk about some quick upcoming events from eBRI. We have our Public Policy Advisory Council meeting next week on July 31st for members. And August 13th, we have our Financial Wellbeing Research Center meeting, again, for members of that group. And another big thing I want to focus in on this year is the eBRI Financial Wellbeing Symposium. This is available to be live streamed for all of our members and the public. So really to be a part of that would be to check in that as well. I want to thank Lisa and Brian and all the good questions that we've had today. I think we've learned a lot. Again, the report is available on the website. You have more information there. These slides and a recording of this will be made available to all that register on our website. That link will be then provided. Again, thank you for joining us today, and everyone have a good afternoon.